Bonjour, hello everybody. We're about to start. The main event will be in English. However, there may be interventions in Arabic, so you will find interpretation on channel 2. The opening statement will be also said in French, so if you need translation in English, we will also be on channel 2. Without further ado,
Bonjour, je suis la présidente de ce dernier suscité. Ce dernier suscité est heureux de travailler avec le groupe indépendant de Yémen pour la liberté du pays, pour que les femmes puissent vivre librement et élever les enfants dans de bonnes conditions. Je vous souhaite une bonne séance. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Merci, Solidarité. Okay, so my name is Guillaume Charon. I am the representative of Independent Diplomat here in Geneva, and I'll have the pleasure of moderating this session today. Today, we'll be discussing the situation of human rights in Yemen. As you know, this has been at the forefront of this Human Rights Council session and agenda. We are happy to see the report by the independent experts. At the same time, I think this is really quite a good opportunity to complement the picture, having with us the independent civil society of South, representing the situation as it is in the south of the country. And today we shall be hearing from Mr. Zaki Osman, who is a human rights expert from the Southern Independent Group. He will present issues in relation to the group of eminent experts and the report that came out. We will have afterwards Anis Abdullah, who is a human rights defender as well from the Southern Independent Group and coordinator with the UN in Aden. Will give us also updates on the human rights situation over there. Representing the situation as it is in the South. Abdullah, who is a human rights defender as well. And finally, we will have, there's a change for those that have the leaflet. We will have Muhammad al-Sahimi, who will be talking about the right to self-determination in southern Yemen. And afterwards, we will try to keep those interventions as relatively brief as possible, and then we will ensure that there is a maximum opportunity to have back and forth and interactive dialogue with everybody here. I hope that this will be as fruitful and constructive dialogue as possible, and I will make sure of that as I moderate. Thank you very much, and on that note, I give the floor to Zaki Osman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As Guillaume said, the first bit of the discussion will be on the analysis on the report. We have a very brief time, 10 minutes maybe or more or less, so I will be focused on the main issues. I will have a human rights perspective on the report. As we know that the group of independent experts was established after almost 4 years of the war in Yemen, or the collapse of the situation in Yemen. And the Human Rights Council established this group of experts after a lot of discussion between members of the Human Rights Council. And the outcome was a good point for accountability to establish international mechanism. And with that mechanism, the Council gave the group of experts the two mandates. One was human rights monitoring or examination of the human rights of allegations of human rights violations in Yemen by all parties, for the purpose of identifying alleged perpetrators and for the purpose of accountability. Meanwhile, they also gave another technical mandate to support the National Commission of Inquiry. On the first part of the mandate, as we know that 3 commissioners were appointed, 3 experts were appointed along with almost seven investigators from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, including advisor on military support and also an advisor on child protection and sexual gender-based violence. before the work, the deployment, the operation of this group of experts, there were some challenges and some opportunities. One of the main challenges was in the context, it was difficult to start investigating issues of human rights after 4 years of the conflict in order to ensure well-documented cases or incidents. Another aspect is the issue, the main aspect that affected heavily the outcome of the report was the issue of access. Only 4 cities were visited by the group of experts, including Sana'a, Saada, Aden, and to certain limit, Hudaydah. One of the main areas that was not visited, and it had a very heavy impact on the report, was Taiz, and there are other areas that I will highlight also. And on the opportunities, let's say one of the challenges as well is in a conflict, in a very sensitive conflict, you also have a very politicized civil society in different areas. So it was not easy. I mean, to be frank and to be credible, you also need to highlight the challenges that face the group of experts. One of the things that we need to know that the government of Yemen gave visas to the advisors and group of experts. Only one investigator was not given visa and was not able to visit Sana'a and the areas under the control of the de facto authority, as mentioned in the report. And that person was the person in charge of the relations, documenting the relations of the countries. By the way, and this is fact, you can check with the group of experts themselves. The opportunities, there was also the human rights presence. OSHR was there in Yemen since before even the conflict, and there is a human rights database that was reviewed by the group of experts, so it was a good source for information. Another reports from Human Rights Watch and a lot of international and Amnesty and a lot of international organizations were there. So they had kind of support that covered the 4 years of gap in terms of having international mechanisms and the presence of the humanitarian agencies for the purpose of denial of access for humanitarian purposes. We also noticed in the report very clearly that they say they appreciated the support given in some areas in terms of access and cooperation in terms of visa and in terms of free access to detention facilities, but especially in Aden. The legal framework, as mentioned in the report, the conflict in Yemen is a non-international armed conflict, and the applicable laws, as it was mentioned, international human rights law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law, and one of the things that we need to take into consideration while talking about the accountability in Yemen, that Yemen is not a member of Rome status, so it's not a member of the ICC, International Criminal Court. And almost all, except one, of the members of the Arab coalition are not members of the Rome status. So the only country is a member is Jordan. The approach, I mean, that's my opinion, the approach of the human rights of the GEE was perpetrators-based approach, more than victims-based approach. Why? Or how? To highlight some of the gaps, if you go through the report, you will see that the victims from airstrikes were hurt, but only in the north, in the areas under the control of Houthi Saleh militias or forces. There was no single victim case in the south that was documented by the airstrikes of the Arab coalition. The victims of the south for the violations that took place in the south from March, the beginning of the conflict, until August was not reported at all. Even in the context, there was no single paragraph saying that there was a conflict or how the war was erupted in the south on 26th of March. So it was a kind of surprise in spite of the free access that was mentioned by the group of experts, that they had free access to the limit that they visited the detention facilities. So it was very obvious. One more thing that the human rights organizations and defenders also, they submitted a lot of documents, even if the quality was not that good. But however, they submitted a lot of reports to the human and they met with the group of experts in different occasions. So it was a surprise. Another issue is the victims of GPC, victims of the party ruled by Saleh, was not mentioned at all. Violations that took place in December and January against, including killing of civilians, harassment, sexual violence against members of GPC, were not mentioned at all. The only paragraph mentioned that Saleh was assassinated by Houthis. Victims of sexual violence were heard, but only in Aden. And the only reason that was only mentioned in Aden, it was because of the free access, including migrants. They were heard, but only in Aden. So the advantage that was given became a disadvantage in a way or other. Limited access was very clearly in the report. The limited access was given in the areas of the Houthis. How? It was given only for the victims of airstrikes and victims of denial of humanitarian access. But it was not given for detention facilities, including the paragraph said that the Houthis made a condition to visit the detention of the political bureau, because they said we will not give access unless you give us guarantees that it will not be attacked by the Arab coalition. There are many things, however, in terms of perpetrators. In terms of perpetrators, and that was the one of the main issues, main things, requirements from the GEE to highlight a potential list of perpetrators. The main perpetrator mentioned, you can figure it out from reading the report, is the government. Because in any context, government has the primary responsibility, legal responsibility, and it was mentioned clearly. The members of the Arab coalition, all of them, I mean, the main actors, Saudi Arabia and UAE, were also mentioned, and have also the paragraphs. The de facto authority, I mean, it was, in some cases, in some teams, they were also held accountable, especially on child protection or child recruitment, detention, cases of arbitrary arrest and detention, and torture. However, it was not to that level in terms of accountability, which I will come to it in the next slide. There are areas not covered, like Ma'rib, Taiz, which led to a problem in terms of identifying the individual perpetrators, which I will come to. And many areas like Abdallah and Lahli in the south, it was not covered because of the no way of visiting. However, there are many NGOs, they visited the group of experts in Aden, and unfortunately we did not see the outcome of that report, of that reporting to the group of experts. So the focus was clearly on Sana'a and Sada in terms of denial of access and attacks using the airstrikes against civilians, and then detention cases in Aden, accusing the government and the security forces, sometimes allegedly by the attached to or to the Southern resistance. There was also confusion in the report between the channel of command on those security forces in the south. Security forces in the south, they belong to the Ministry of Interior. However, the report was confused in terms of identifying the responsibility of actions made by the security forces. The themes, there are a lot of themes covered. In the report, except some themes. A nice example, using civilians as human shields was not covered. And this was one of the main issues about fighters of Houthis using civilian uniforms. So it was not mentioned, and it was something that critical to be discussed. Landmines issues, attacks against religious objects and historical objects or premises, which took place in the south in different areas by all parties of the conflict, and the denial of humanitarian or using humanitarian assistance for military purposes, especially in Taiz. that was under the seat for 1 year. It was not mentioned. And the only paragraph mentioned about it in terms of accountability, in Canada was something very interesting, that the group of experts talked about 2 levels. When they talked about attacks on airstrikes, they were using 2 terms. They were using one, the group of experts investigated. So they did action themselves. They investigated and verified cases. They met with the victims and witnesses. When they used the issue of denial of access for humanitarian purposes on all Yemen, they used the same term. When they investigated the sexual violence in the south by security forces, they used the same term. When they investigated the issues of detention and arbitrary arrest, they used the same term, investigated. However, in Taiz, this word was not used. They just used 2 words, review and gather information, which will not lead at all to individual accountability. The other thing they mentioned in terms of accountability, they mentioned clearly that on attacks against civilians in Taiz, they held the Houthis accountable for those attacks. But they said something very interesting. Breakdown of responsibility for civilian casualties in Taiz requires further investigation, paragraph 41, 43, which means that individual responsibility is not mentioned, which means that names of commanders who are responsible for violations in Taiz are not mentioned at all in the confidential list of perpetrators. However, they mentioned in different occasions that the responsibility, individual group and individual responsibility, was identified on issues of airstrikes and the denial of humanitarian access and incidents of arbitrary arrest and detention documented in Aden. So this also gives us an indication of who will be in the list of the perpetrators submitted to the Office of the High Commissioner. The conclusion, there are serious concerns.
It's okay, sorry.
There are serious concerns on the independence of the National Commission of Inquiry, as was mentioned even in the report. Meanwhile, also we have no international mechanism. We are concerned on the balanced approach in the outcome of this GEE that is not matching the hope of the victims. This document is not only useful for the purpose of accountability for prosecution. It should be a document for long run, for reparation, transitional justice mechanisms. And if a big group of victims were not heard in this report, like the victims of the South, then we will have a big problem that will not be able to get their rights, the right of reparation. So it was very clear that the report was being focused on perpetrators, not on victims, for the future of transitional justice. Because of the time, I have many things, but conclusion in terms of recommendation, it's very clear that we have concern on the independence and impartiality of the National Commission of Inquiry. So I think a reform of National Commission of Inquiry is must to ensure independence in according to Paris principles, and civil society participation, taking consideration the geographical dynamics, south and north, is must. The national mechanism on transitional justice is needed, with and it's necessary that the countries involved in the conflict in Yemen, they should have held the responsibility to contribute for the reparation for the victims of the human rights violations. The Human Rights Council needs to review. During the interactive dialogue, they need to review the gaps mentioned by all actors while discussing the renewal or possibility of renewal, because there are serious gaps and victims were not heard again. And I don't think we are here just to hear about the perpetrators only, but we want to hear about all victims, to be balanced between victims and perpetrators in terms of balance between using the mechanisms of transitional justice. There is also something important, regardless of the unbalanced list of perpetrators. It's about UN entities to take into consideration the list of potential perpetrators submitted by the group of eminent experts, to to ensure that technical support for institutions involved that were found involved in the human rights violations is reviewed in according to the human rights due diligence policy. It's not acceptable to find a perpetrator to be engaged in the peace process. It's not acceptable to find a perpetrator of human rights violation to be there in the next phase of peace in Yemen. As one of the human rights principles or human rights due diligence, UN should stop providing technical support to anyone who are found accused or held accountable for human rights violations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaki. I think that if I can have a quote from what you said is the perpetrator approach versus the victim-based approach somewhat leads to a patchy or sketchy human rights, a report on the situation of human rights. We'll give the opportunity to have the floor interact on all of these considerations after the other presentations. So without further ado, Anis Abdullah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. التقرير عن انتهاكات الحوثيين وصالح في عدن، وسيتحدث التقرير عن الفترة الممتدة من مارس إلى يوليو 2015 وهي الانتهاكات التي لم يتطرق إليها التقرير الاخبار الدولي. خلال الفترة من مارس إلى يوليو 2015 انتهك ميليشيات الحوثي وصالح بعض مديريات محافظة عدن وهي خور مكسر، قريته والمعلى والتواهي، تباعا وبعض أجزاء من المديريات الأخرى الواقعة في الجهة الشمالية الغربية للمحافظة. قامت تلك الميليشيات باستهداف المدنيين والبنية التحتية للمدينة بشكل عام ومباشر بانتهاك واضح للقوانين والمواثيق والعهود الدولية. ومن تلك الانتهاكات استهداف المدنيين، ارتكبت ميليشيات الحوثي وقوات صالح العديد من مجازر المروعة ضد المدنيين والتي تعتبر جرائم ضد الإنسانية وجرائم حرب مكتملة الأركان. تم رصد مجازر خلال فترة الاجتياح محافظة عدن ومن من مارس إلى أغسطس 2015 وحدثت في مختلف مديريات المحافظة، وكانت في كل من التواهي المنصورة، كابوتا، المنصورة بلوك 4 بلوك 5 بساتين داسع، منطقة شيخان داسع في مدارس رياض الأطفال والسكن الجامعي للشعب. وكانت مجزرة التواهي داسع منطقة شيخان من أكثر المجازر توسعا بالسكان المدنيين في محافظة عدن. وهنا مجزرة التواهي وكانت في 6 مايو 2015. في صباح يوم الأربعاء 6 مايو 2015 تجمعت عشرات الأسر من المواطنين المدنيين الراغبين بالنزوح والهروب من مدينة التواهي إلى مدينة بوريقة كونها أكثر أمنا، وتجمع منهم ما يقارب 500 إلى 400 شخص على رصيف الميناء بانتظار وصول القوارب لنقلهم إلى مدينة البوريقة. وفي تلك الأثناء سقطت قذيفة هاون إلى البحر بالقرب من الرصيف والحقتها قذائف ثانية مباشرة لتسقط وسط جموع المواطنين ليسقطوا بين قتيل وجريح، وتلحق بها قذيفة ثالثة بنفس المكان ليسقط أغلب من كان هناك شظايا القذائف، ومن ضمنهم من كان على القارئ الذي بدأ بالإبحار وعلى مثل ما يقارب 50 نازح. وقد نتج عن ذلك الهجوم سقوط ما يقارب 57 قتيل بينهم نساء وأطفال، من ضمنهم رضع لم يتجاوز 3 أشهر، و215 جريح بينهم نساء وأطفال. ثم لها مجزرة داسع وكانت يوم 19/7/2015. معانا من ميليشيات الحوثي وصالح في إلحاق الضرر بالمدنيين قد تعمدت ارتكاب مجازر مروعة في انتهاك واضح للقانون الدولي لحقوق الإنسان. وأثناء حصارها على مدير الداسع ارتكبت تلك الميليشيات حق المدنيين جرائم مثل العديد من الجرائم والانتهاكات حقوق الإنسان والتي ترتقي إلى مصاف جرائم الحرب. هي من أكثر المجازر وحشية وبشاعة التي ارتكبتها تلك الميليشيات المدنية. قد تمت على 4 استهدافات متفرقة على مدار اليوم. ففي 19/7/2015 وعلى مدار هذا اليوم قامت ميليشيات الحوثي وصالح بقصف وبشكل عشوائي على الأحياء الداخلية من مدينة داسع والبعيدة من خط القطار الواقع في أطراف المدينة بشمال محافظة عدن، مما أدى إلى سقوط العشرات من القتلى والجرحى من المدنيين بينهم نساء وأطفال. وحسب تأكيدات مكتب الصحة وأيضا تأكيد رئيس بعثة أطباء بلا حدود في اليمن تقرير المنظمة، هذا وحسب إحصائيات منظمة أطباء بلا حدود أن بلغ عدد الضحايا في نهاية اليوم الأسبوعي 300 منهم 100 قتيل بينهم 15 طفل و8 نساء و200 جريح بينهم 16 طفل و17 امرأة. والمجزرة كانت الأولى في 6/5/2015 التي ارتكبت في التواهي. كان منهم 57 قتيل، من بينهم 12 طفل و6 نساء، والجرحى من بينهم 25 طفل، 15 من النساء. ولم يكتفوا بذلك بل استهدف الأعيان المدنية وتدوير البنية التحتية. وتعمدت ميليشيات الحوثي الوصال على استخدام اسلوب القصف العشوائي المكثف والعنيف على الاعيان المدنيه العامه والخاصه بقصف تدوير البنيه التحتيه لمدينه عدن. وكان القصف يتركز على المرافق الحكوميه والخدميه والتي تتعرض للتدمير مثل المستشفيات ودار العباده. ومن اكثر المرافق التي تعرضت للقصف المنهك هي شركه مصافي عدن في بني عدن، مما تسبب بتدمير جزء من مخزنات مصافي عدن. كما تم استهداف ميناء الزيت ومدينه البريقه بقصف تعطيلا من استقبال السفن التي تحمل المساعدات الانسانيه والغذائيه الى المدينه المحاصره والتي لم يتبقى لها الا هذا المنفذ البحري الوحيد الذي اصبح هو شريان الحياه لسكان مدينه عدن بعد اقامه ميليشيات الحوثي صالح السيطره على المدينه. ومن ضمن الانتهاكات كان الاحتجاج التعسفي والاخفاء القسري. انتشرت نقاط التفتيش تابعه لميليشيات الحوثي ووصل على طول الطرقات في المناطق التي احكمت السيطره عليها. ومن بين المجالات الاخرى قد استخدمت الميليشيات مشاهدون يقفون ملثمين بنقاط التفتيش بحميتهم الاشاره الى اي شخص يمر في تلك النقاط في تلك النقطه فيتم اعتقاله مباشره ولا يتم معرفه مصيره. في بعض الاوقات يتم الاعتقال بسبب الانتماء الى مناطق معينه او في اوقات معينه لا تعين. ومن الاحصائيات الرقميه عدد القتلى والجرحى الى خلال الفتره التي كان فيها الميليشيات كان 1115 قتيلا و9794 جريحا حسب الامم المتحده وتم تسجيل المجاهد. لكن المؤكد ان تلك الاحداث ليست صحيحه ونهائيه بل هي اكثر من ذلك. وبعضهم معتبر بدا من شده الحوثي قتلوا تحت التأمين ومنهم ثاني عمر هو المقلوب. عدد القتلى من النساء 196 امراه والجرحى 2722 وعدد القتلى 123 طفل. المنازل المدمرة 1966 منزل منها 702 تدمير كلي و1264 تدمير جزئي. المحلات التجارية بلغ عددها 684 محل تجاري ما بين محترم ومنفوق منها 3 مراكز تجارية كبيرة. النازحين من المدينة إلى بعض المديريات المجاورة الأكثر أمنا بلغ عددها 5050 و200,000 إلى الدول المجاورة و50,000 إلى الصومال. وأحتاج إلى عدد النازحين 8,000 سكان. تحتاج المدينة لإعادة الأعمار فقط من 4 إلى 3 مليون. التوصيات يقدم هذا التقرير مجموعة من التوصيات التي قد تعمل على الحد المستقبلي من ارتكاب انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان وتوفير الحماية. يطالب مجلس حقوق الإنسان اتخاذ الإجراءات التي من شأنها تحقيق دول المستقبل ونزيد الانتهاكات المختلفة في جنوب اليمن الناتجة عن اجتياح ميليشيات الحوثي صالح في عام 2015 والتي أغفلها تقرير مجموعة الخبراء الصادر في 28 أغسطس 2018 وذلك باتخاذ الإجراءات الكثيرة بضمان إحالة ملفات الانتهاكات للمحكمة الجنائية الدولية لإنصاف الضحايا وعدم إتلاف مختلف تلك الانتهاكات من العقاب من جنود المنفذين وقيادات عسكرية وسياسية أمرا وجه بصفتهم فاعلون مصريين وشركاء في ارتكاب تلك الجرائم. 2. مطالبة الحكومة اليمنية ودول الاتحاد لإلزامهم بتقديم تعويضات لضحايا الانتهاكات أو أفراد أسرهم وفقا للمعايير الدولية المعمول بها. وطالبت دول الاتحاد المساعد في إعادة أعمار الجنوب في إطار خطة إعادة الأعمار الشاملة للمناطق اليمنية التي تحت سيطرة القوات الحكومية. المطالبة بإطلاق سراح وزير الدفاع اللواء محمود الصبيحي ورفاق عقلية الأسرى المنتقلين في سكون ميليشيات الحوثي. المطالبة الجادة والحثيثة من الكف لاستخدام الهجمات العشوائية ضد المدنيين والمدنيين.
شكرا يا انيس. وتصور انه معظم هذه المعلومات خطوها دلوقتي استاذ صالح we will have now محمد الساحمي who will present the issue the right to self-determination in southern Yemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for attending this session. I will probably not go into much details about the law of self-determination and what the international laws are stating. But I will more talk about the justification for self-determination in the case of South Yemen. And I will take you through a brief background about the South Yemen and the conflict, how the conflict started, and the human rights violation in terms of committed by both the Houthis and the current government as well in South Yemen. A brief background, I don't know if the slides are working, but we actually prepared slides to present so it helps you as well read. But I don't think that's working. So I'll have to just read it to you, and hopefully I will be able to convey the information required for your benefit. South Yemen, the population of South Yemen is estimated to be 5 million. The area is 360,133 kilometers. The capital is Aden, which is strategic and important port. The economic activity is agriculture, fishing, natural resources. South Yemen, just brief history on South Yemen, which was occupied by the British in 1839 for 128 years. It gained its independence from the British on the 30th of November 1967 and became known as People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. I think before that it went through another name, which was the Republic of South Yemen before it became democratic. It was ruled by one party, the Socialist Party, from 1967 to 1990. It was an effective statehood which managed to create law and order. It managed to end the tribal influence in the whole region, the whole south. It moved from tribalism to functioning state institutions, managed to eradicate corruption, impose the rule of law. Free healthcare was provided, free education, civil society, guaranteed employment upon graduation for young people. Women's rights was very important and crucial part of the state of South Yemen at that time, and women played a major role in the development of South Yemen and the government as well at that time. Unfortunately, that did not continue. In 22nd of May 1990, a unification was formed between South and North of Yemen, which I call a hasty kind of decision made by two individuals without taking consideration to the desire of the people. There was no actual referendum in order to make a decision like that. So it was made between the leadership, and that is the result of the failure of the unification. Looking at that unification, we could see apparently that it actually took one side, and it was controlled from the start by the northern side, which is the northern regime. You can see the capital was Sana'a, North Yemen. The currency was Riyal, North Yemen again. The president of the unified Yemen was Ali Abdullah Saleh, North Yemen. So between 1990 and 1994, the northern regime was already planning to exclude the south from this unification and take control of the whole south. They started by assassinating elements of the leadership of the southern elements of the southern leadership. 160 people plus were killed and assassinated during that time. A conflict started between the leadership at that time from 1990 to 94. The coalition of the northern allies, the tribe, the extremists, and the regime began to take hold of the country's marginalized southerners. Tens of thousands of southerners forced out of military and civil positions. When the conflict started between 1994, the Arab League and some other Arab countries tried to resolve that issue, and the Georgian Accord was signed at that time in order to find a peace solution for the crisis. That did not actually happen. North Yemen, the regime was already planning to take over and control the whole of South Yemen. And in 21st of May 1994, because of the conflict itself, the president of South Yemen at that time, a unity president after that, declared the unilateral deunification of South Yemen and the reestablishment of South Yemen state. This actually triggered a violent reaction by the northern, and the north invaded the south, taking over complete control of the south in 7 July 1994. I remember the Arab League met in between, and they have declared that the unification cannot be imposed by force, and it should be a dialogue in order to do that. That was ignored. Thousands of Southerners were killed, and the war caused an exodus of Southern refugees fleeing persecution. No attempts were made by the Northern-led and controlled regime to remedy the Southern grievance after the war. Widespread corruption on huge scale included awarding of vast areas of land and rights to natural resources in the south to northern tribal chiefs, military figures, and religious extremist leaders. The whole infrastructure of South Yemen was destroyed, the culture was destroyed. Between 1994 and 2007, continuing demand by the Southerners for equality met meaningless appointments of Southern figures in apparent position of power to appease international public opinion, but the real power remained with the Northern powerhouse, tribal extremists and the regime. The Southerners at that time were actually demanding the correction of that unification in order for the Southerners to live, to find justice within that unification. That was received with a kind of rejection by the regime at that time, who felt they had the power after the victory to take over and to ignore all the demands and by the Southern people. Feeling oppressed and with rightful demand ignored, Southerners began the South Peaceful Movement, which began on 7 July 2007. You give my colleagues more time than me, so I've got to continue. Okay. Okay, I will try to be as quick as possible. 7 July was the formation of the Hirak, the movement, the peaceful movement, in mass demonstrations throughout the south of Yemen, demanding secession from the north. This movement was met with fierce and violent force by the regime, and over 3,000 activists were killed, thousands injured, detained, or fled the country for safety. Post-unity, now we kind of, you will see the other side of the statehood that we had previously. Corruption spread, breakdown of civil law, breakdown of law and order, tribalism and social division, non-existence of education system, widespread illiteracy, while South Yemen at one point in 1985 was considered by UNESCO as one of the countries that managed to eradicate kind of or successfully eradicate the illiteracy in South Yemen. Unaffordable health care, people will be dying without finding the right treatment. High immortality rate, widespread poverty, high level of employment, rise, this is very important point, the rise of Al-Qaeda and the extremist group. That was after the 1994 war, and these were brought by the regime of Ali Abdullah Saleh at that time, and they were called the Arab Afghans. They moved them to fight in the 1994, and they were planted in southern cities and took control of some of these cities. In 1995, the south was attacked by the north once again by the army of the former president and the Iranian-backed Houthi militias. Ongoing war reinforced the north desire to ensure that the south remain occupied, and all northern warring parties, despite the conflict, maintain a unified position to deny Southerners the right to self-determination. And many southern cities were bombarded, devastated. I think you heard from my colleague here, and they have heard some figures about that. Hundreds and thousands of people moved to another areas looking for safety, Djibouti and other countries. The legitimate government of Hadi, now we have a government after the fail of the previous regime, was the previous regime. I don't consider that as a removal of a previous regime, but it was the individual on top was moved, but the regime is still there. It still existed, and it actually does the same thing. It failed to show the Southerners that they can be respected and treated differently to provide government. Many months since the Southern resistance, also the Houthis and the former President Saleh forced, nothing has been done by Hadi government to improve the lives of people in South Yemen. Not even the most basic services secure. The South resistance leaders tried, and they tried to administer, and they were put in position to rule, but they were prevented from doing that by the regime, and at one point they were dismissed from their positions. It became clear that the regime did not wish to deal with the Southern people still, and this led to the establishment of the STC in April 2017. Establishment in Edin announced on 11 May 2017, consists of 26 members. The STC, by the way, is the Southern Transitional Council, which represents the Southern cause at the moment, and it had a base. Majority of the Southerners are in support of the Southern Transitional Council. It represents the South people, both work with international coalition and combat terrorism, which has actually achieved in the southern areas in Abiyan, in Hadramaut, and in other parts. I'm just going to skip through these because just a few comments on this one. I'm aware of the time. They failed government which actually participate or practices a widespread corruption in the whole of Yemen, not just in the south, have denied people the basic services such as water, electricity, medical care, education, even sanitation. This is, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people believe that, it's a collective punishment of South Yemenis for their legitimate demand for self-determination. This cannot be accepted by the international community and should not be accepted by human rights organizations as well. Combined with the exclusion of the South in the peace process negotiation led by Special Envoy Chairman Martin Griffiths, the people of the South have come out on the streets in anger, and they will not stop until their demands are met. I must say that the peace process in Yemen must be an inclusive process, and all important issues must be discussed, including the southern issue. I think the Special Envoy is actually rewarding criminals for their crimes in Yemen and ignoring the real partners who could be vital for any peace process or for lasting and durable process. The South is the key to any long-lasting and durable peace in Yemen and the region, without which the process is set to fail. It will not succeed without including the Southeast. The division in Yemen between the South and the North is so deep and cannot be managed. And just finally, I will say Yemen has tried unification and failed. I believe that it's time for Yemeni people in both North and South to live like humans again, away from wars and crimes. And the only way forward is by creating two states, South and North, living side by side in peace and harmony. If the South issue is not resolved in accordance with the desire of the Southern people, war will not end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muhammad. So thank you for all your presentation, and once again, thank you, Solidarity. And now I would like to give the floor for any questions and answers. Please try to focus on the questions, and if you have any particular statements, please try to keep them as short as possible in order to ensure that others have the possibility of asking questions. And so in that spirit, I will take 2 or 3 questions in a row for the answers to be addressed, and then another round and another round until we are kicked out of this room, as usual. Thank you. Please, sir. And if you could state your name before you.
اسمي علي عبد الله البقيري من اليمن. استمعنا إلى المداخلات الممتازة اللي قدمها الإخوة من اللجنة المنظمة، وأشكرهم على حسن التنظيم لهذا اللقاء والتمييز والإعداد الجيد. لي ملاحظات على تقرير لجنة الخبراء. تقرير لجنة الخبراء تم تسييسه على وجه التحديد يعني، وتم تسديد كل اتجاهات التقرير ضد الدول المعينة على وجه التحديد، ولم يتطرق إلى القضايا الجوهرية التي كان ينتظر منها العالم أو ينتظر العالم ردود حول المشكلة اليمنية على وجه التحديد شمالا وجنوبا. يعني إذا أخذنا حقيقة الإشارات التي وردت في التقرير جدا متناقضة جدا. مثلا وجدت إشارات تتناقض مع التقارير الدولية. هناك تقرير دولي يعترف بحكومة الشرعية، وعندما تأتي الحكومة الشرعية تريد استعادة جزء من الأراضي التي يسميوها أنها تتبع للدولة الشرعية، يصفها التقرير بأنها تقوم بعدوان على الحديدة. هذه واحدة من التناقضات العجيبة جدا يعني، بالإضافة إلى تناقضات أخرى يعني تتعلق بالعدد الضحايا. يتحدث التقرير عن 16,000 قتيل بسبب قصف الطيران، بينما الحقيقة المعلومات المؤكدة والتي نشرتها رسميا كثير من الوكالات والمنظمات 46,000 قتيل تم قتلهم في عدن وتعز بسبب الأيادي الحوثية وليس بسبب الطيران. فإذا في تناقضات كثيرة جدا وردت في التقرير مع الأسف تجعل الواحد يقول من الحيادية تكاد تكون غير موجودة. استهداف دولة الإمارات على وجه التحديد يعني من خلال هذا التقرير كان واضح جدا، ولعل في ذلك تصفية حسابات أخرى في المنطقة تدور يعني. وكان حزب الإصلاح اليمني وجماعة الأخوان ممثلة بقناة الجزيرة هي الأساس في توجيه كثير من اتجاهات التقرير. لم يتطرق التقرير إلى نشاط حزب الله في اليمن ودوره في تدريب الحوثيين، لم يتطرق إلى إيران ودورها في غزو اليمن ومحاولة السيطرة على باب المندب، لم يتطرق إلى كثير الصواريخ التي تطلق هنا وهناك على اليمن وخارج اليمن. يعني في أشياء كثيرة جدا غفلها التقرير، مما يجعل الواحد يقول أن الحيادية كانت غير موجودة مع الأسف، ولهذا وجب لفت النظر إلى هذه الملاحظات. شكرا جزيلا أخي الرئيس.
عائشة السندي من منظمة الانسان لحقوق الانسان والسلام في المانيا. يعني خلال 4 سنوات من بداية شن قوات التحالف الاماراتي السعودي هجومها على اليمن، نحن نتحدث اليوم كما تحدثتم انتم عن انتهاكات حقوق الانسان سواء في الشمال او في الجنوب. الدم اليمني هو دم غالي. فالدم اليمني هو دم غالي سواء في الشمال او في الجنوب، وانتهاكات حقوق الانسان تتساوى سواء في الشمال او في الجنوب. لكن انتم تغاضيتم عن انتهاكات قوات الامارات والسعوديه في الجنوب، والتي هي واقعه كما ذكرت المنظمات الدوليه وتقرير الخبراء من الاعتقالات ومن الاغتصابات ومن احتلال الموانئ، احتلال الجنوب وهي اراضي يمنيه. والسؤال هنا هو لماذا تم التغاضي عن هذه الجرائم؟ وما هو الحل لوقف هذه الانتهاكات في اليمن؟ والسؤال الثاني هو لماذا يتم ارسال المقاتلين من الجنوب للقتال في الحدود حدود السعوديه مع اليمن وفي الحديده؟ وهذا ايضا يعتبر انتهاك. يتم ارسال مقاتلين خدمه المصالح السعوديه والامارات في اليمن. والسؤال الثالث هو ما هو دور المجتمع الدولي وانتم كحقوقيين في الوقوف ضد هذه الانتهاكات ووقف الاعمال العدوانيه التي تقوم بها قوات التحالف اليمن؟ وشكرا.
شكرا. بعدين ناخذ هذا الراوند وبعدين نرجع لكم اذا ممكن نديهم فرصه يردوا على 2 statements.
As expected, the report will be the issue of today. Going back to the second question, why we did not, as you said, why you did not report about the relations committed by UAE in the south or by the Arab-led relations in the south, which is not accurate. We say the opposite. Why the violations committed in the South was not investigated, not by us, by the group of experts, the international independent mechanism that was supposed to document violations from all sides. The NGOs from South Yemen, they visited, met, provided information that was not seen in the report. If the NGOs in South Yemen were not cooperative, you will not see anything in the report about the violations of the sexual violence, migrants. You will not see anything about arbitrary arrest and detention. It's the opposite. Why you did not report about human rights violations, incidents in Sana'a and Saada in terms of arbitrary arrest and detention and violations in the entire? There was a gap. It's the opposite. We asked this question to the group of experts. Why was not highlighted? It seems that there were serious concerns on the protection of witnesses of NGOs, which was mentioned clearly in the report. That for the purpose of the protection of witnesses, they were not able to do it. So it's the opposite. Yes, the report is not matching the expectations of the victims in South and North. It's not matching the expectations of the civilians, and it will not lead to the dream of accountability in Yemen for South and North, for the civilians in South.
Please.
Thank you. My name is Ibrahim from Yemen. I want to just touch upon 2-3 points. My points to Mr. Zaki, I agree with you. I can have a sense that the eminent group, they have went out from their mandate. They have not covered their mandate. It was the report has significant politician rather than legal one. Second is, I agree with you that where is from the report the victims' rights in Adam and Tais. That was very important gap. Third, that you mentioned about the interactive dialogue. Do you think that the interactive dialogue should be highlighted in the council? What is the position of the report? Has to be endorsed or has to be neglecting? What is exactly what do you think about it? Next, what is next in the coming expected resolution? That is my point, and a point to Mr. Muhammad when he said in 1950 that the South has been invaded by North. It was not invaded by North, by the Houthis and by Ali Abdullah Saleh militia. Thank you.
شكرا أستاذ الرئيس. نحن متفقون تقريبا الآن. التقرير مسيس، تقرير الخبراء مسيس وخرج الحديث عن ولايتين. ماذا بعد؟ هل سيمدد تتوقعون تمديد مجلس حقوق الانسان لولايه هذا الفريق؟ هل هناك دعم اكثر لآلية وطنيه لتحقيق العداله وانصاف الضحايا؟ اعتقد ان ما يهمنا جميعا هنا الان انصاف الضحايا. انصاف الضحايا سواء كان بلجنه دوليه بلجنه وطنيه اعتقد ان تقرير الخبراء اثبت تسيسه واثبت انه نفذ التقريري خارج عن ولايته. ما هي توقعاتكم في ذلك؟
Thank you. 1 second. We're getting kicked out of the room, so if you want an answer, please make it as short as possible.
My question is to Mr. Muhammad. While reading the history of South Yemen, you have mentioned that from 1967 to 1990, there was Socialist Party rule there. Why that Socialist Party have collapsed that government, and what was the main reason? What are the main reasons for that? Is there any possibility to regain the Socialist Party there?
Thank you. Very brief. So, Alwa. Go ahead. Let's make it really quick because we won't have the opportunity to answer.
عندي سؤال ذو شقين. السؤال الأول السيد متطرقا بخصوص حقوق الأسير، الأشياء فيها إلى الإلحاق التي تقدم بها الأمم المتحدة إلى مجلس الأمن الذي أطلقها منذ يومين أو 3، قال في هذه الإحاطة أن هناك الأصوات الجنوبية لابد من الاستماع لها. أود معرفتكم بالنسبة لي إذا كنت فعلا ستكونون موجودين، سيكون مجلس الانتقال الجنوبي والأصوات الجنوبية موجودة في طاولة المفاوضات أو المشاورات التي قد تحدث قريبا، خصوصا بعد أن فشلت الأسبوع الماضي بعد أن لم يحضر فريق الحوثيين. السؤال الآخر هو بالنسبة المتعلق بلجنة تقديم الخبراء، سيتقدم بإحصائيات وبيانات عن انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان. هل تقدمتم بهذه الإحصائيات؟ هي معروفة لدينا، لكن هل أنتم قمتم بالسعي لتقديمها للجنة الخبراء، خاصة أنهم يقولون أنهم قد فتحوا المجال لاستقبال هذه المعلومات؟ أود أن أعرف أين البحث أو الوصول. شكرا.
One last word.
Yeah, documents. It was submitted, yes. Yes, we confirm that incidents, documents, reports were submitted many times, face to face to the group of experts and the investigators, and we know them one by one. The other thing, yes, in the absence of independent commission of inquiry, national one, and with concerns of international one, we'll have a dilemma. We want a reform of national one. If someone doesn't want the international, so you need to reform the National Commission of Inquiry. Otherwise, it would be the absence of accountability will continue.
Thank you, Zaki. One sentence.
Yeah, just quick on the question about the Socialist Party. I think the thing that the Cold War ended at that time, and the Socialist government also, just Russia kind of changed its direction, and the whole socialist movement has changed at that time, and that was led to the change of some of the thinking of the Socialist Party in South Africa.
Thank you very much. And if you want, you can interact with any of them outside.